back on the theme of justice. In the first justice video, we talked about different categories of justice, different lenses through which we understand justice, like punitive justice and corrective and restorative justice, and also distributive justice. And this latter has an application in the economic sphere. We think about fairness, we think about the glaring inequalities. There's the equality again happening. We look around the world and some people are starving in the gutter and other people are living high on the hog in the lap of luxury. And we wonder about the justice of that. And it's certainly very practical and very alive, because if we ask our richest citizens to do something to alleviate the sufferings of our poorer citizens, and if we tax them in order to have the means to do something for the disadvantaged, then we're more or less saying that there is an obligation incumbent upon them to care for their fellow citizens. For some people, this is absolutely fine. It's absolutely fine if they have enough for themselves, if they have a roof over their head, access to food and medical treatment and education, that they can give some of their means, have it redistributed to alleviate the plight of people that don't have a roof over their head or security or access to food and medicines and education and so on. Some people are absolutely fine with it. They're absolutely fine with the way their government does that. Some people are fine with the principle of distributive justice and distribution or redistribution. And yet they may have a quibble or a considerable quarrel with the way their government decides how to redistribute the general wealth of society, how to divide up the pie. There are other people that maybe hardcore libertarians who are against the whole idea of compulsory taxation. They think, well, it's a nice thing, it's a good thing if somebody voluntarily decides to alleviate the plight of somebody who's poor or badly circumstanced. But it needs to be a voluntary act of charity. To introduce taxation, which is a coercive measure, which is done under penalty, it is an injustice against the giver. It turns what might have been a free gift into something that's akin to extortion. Because if you don't do it, you can be penalised, you can even be imprisoned, and you can have more confiscated. So, well, that's an understandable point of view, but the problem is that maybe enough would be redistributed, maybe not enough. Maybe some people would choose to give and others, as would be their right, would choose not to give. But is there anything like an obligation on us to seek and achieve a better redistribution of both the social goods and the economic goods of society. And this is a justice question, isn't it? It's a question of distributive justice.
In some countries it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think everywhere that we ask this question, we ask it in our society. I don't know a single country that doesn't ask this question. Whenever elections are coming up, they're debating what the tax system should look like and who should get what, how the pie, as it were, should be divided up. Now, let's just distinguish that from the question of material equality. Now, we're not saying here that everybody should have the same of everything. You have one house of a certain size, and it's therefore the next person must have the same house, and the next person must have the same house. You have X number of items in your wardrobe, they have to have X number of items in their wardrobe. You get one car, they get one car, or you get two cars and they get two cars. You get a certain allocation of food. We're not talking about material equality, because it's not necessarily a good thing to strive for material equality. Maybe there are some people who'd be proponents of it, but generally, most people don't have a problem if somebody has more stuff than they do, or more titles even, in certain areas, as long as they are faring all right themselves. If there's enough business in the market for me to be able to survive and for my family to be able to survive, I won't resent somebody who maybe wants to put in more hours at work and build up a bigger business and take more profits. There wouldn't be that resentment. And that's a fair comment, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. I think if people feel secure, you won't have that resentment.
Yes.
It's all about security. It's only insecure people that feel resentment.
Yes, so if you've got enough for your needs to be able to get on with your life, but somebody's a workaholic and they want to put in more hours.
Then fair enough. They put in the more hours, they deserve to get a bit more.
Yeah, and I think most people would agree that they wouldn't want to change that situation.
I don't want to begrudge them that, yeah.
But then there are inequalities of birth as well.
Oh.
So let's say somebody is born into an affluent country, into a rich established family. They're going to get a bomb of an inheritance, and all the doors open for them because their family is very well socially connected, and life seems to be on easy street from woe to go, versus somebody who's born maybe into a poverty, into an indigenous family in Africa that is stricken by chronic drought.
Sad,
I mean, drought itself is chronic, but like
it's
repeated or extended drought, and there's malnutrition abounding, and there's not enough food, and let alone opportunities for education and development. Should society...
It goes back into birth. Then a lot of people say, well...
Should society do something to remedy that?
Well, a lot of people reckon the remedy is that if a person is in that situation, maybe they shouldn't have children.
That's a separate question. But the question here is, there are obvious different circumstances of birth. There are inequalities of birth.
Oh, of course.
Right?
Absolutely.
And in it, nobody knows where they're going to be born.
No, they don't. They're just brought into the world.
That's why that political philosopher John Rawls, who wrote A Theory of Justice, published in 1971, he laid out an intuition. He said to understand what we should do about these inequalities of birth, he imagined people behind a veil of ignorance. Before you were to take birth or to be born into a specific family, a specific location, a specific socioeconomic situation, you don't know who you're going to be. Okay, but imagine you were ignorant of that.
Which you are.
Yeah, imagine you didn't know whether you're going to be born male or female. Imagine if you didn't know whether you're going to be born rich or poor, or to a rich family or a poor family. Imagine if you didn't know whether you're going to be born in a country where there are general freedoms, or a country which was going to be under an oppressive regime for most of your growing up. Imagine if you didn't know whether you were going to be born congenitally handicapped.
That's why
or whether you were going to be born blessed with a powerful body or a really tall body with quick reflexes and great musculature, such that you could easily, well, not easily, but make a top sportsman, maybe enter the NBA or so on and succeed. But if you're born a pygmy, let's say, that avenue of development wouldn't be open to you. So imagine if you knew nothing, and then...
It goes back to the parents, I think. I think that under...
No, but imagine that you were about to take birth, right? And you have to come from this... What should be the original position? How should the table be set, as it were? How should society be set in its institutions and policies such that you would want to be born into that society, not knowing whether you had any advantages, disadvantages, not knowing who you were going to be or where you're going to be? Do you understand? He was casting a thought experiment to say that if we are to start thinking properly about justice and how it should look like, especially as mediated by our institutions, the law courts, the parliament, and so on, then we have to imagine that we are saying how things should be behind the veil of ignorance. Because if we don't set up our society in a way that is going to take care of somebody with Down syndrome or severely handicapped, how do I know that I'm not going to be that person with Down syndrome or severe incapacitation? Yeah.
Which is horrific.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think that having a child is a serious issue. Should be taken seriously.
Well, that's a whole another set of concerns, isn't it? That's what the parents' responsibility. There's the parents' responsibility for when and how and if they bring a child into the world.
Yeah. They've got to look at their circumstances, what they can offer the child. Genetics, you look at your partner, see if they're genes that you want in your child and vice versa.
Well, that brings up a whole lot of other issues as well. Genetic selection, gene editing, eugenics, and so on. Now, there's too much in there. And how much control over life is there? But just for now, we have to focus our attention on the kind of society that you would want to be born into if you didn't know who you were going to be, when you were going to be born, and where you were going to be born. Like, you don't know whether you're going to be a man or a woman, so you couldn't presume any particular privileges that belong to your gender. You didn't know whether you're going to be born black or white, so to speak, or which ethnicity you're going to be born, in which place. So you have to make allowance that you could be born anywhere. And only then, if you could become so dispassionate and universal in your thinking, by abstracting yourself from all concrete circumstances, only then can you start thinking in terms of justice principles and how society should be run. And it's an interesting thought experiment, and it's worth a consideration. I don't know whether you quite get the force of that thought experiment, but it's all very well, like if you're born, I don't know, Caucasian male into a privileged family with great wealth in an affluent country, and you just raised in that situation, there may be a lot that you take for granted. And you may just have a general sense of entitlement. Like,
Of course you would.
I and my ilk, I and my friends, the people I know in my social network, we're entitled to this. And then you might rationalise that we deserve this. It's merit-based justice.
You'll
If other
justify it somehow, yeah.
Yeah, the people that don't have it, well, they don't have it for a reason. Maybe they're not as deserving as we are. Maybe their families didn't work as hard. Maybe they don't work as hard. Maybe they don't live the right way. Maybe they don't have the right attitudes. And we see,
Maybe they're not educated enough or whatever.
or maybe they're too lazy to be educated. Now, I think a lot of privileged people, if they are fair-minded and if they do a little bit of this Rawlsian thought experiment, they can see that it's by accident of birth that I seem to have advantages here. Right? It's not that person's fault that they weren't born into such fortunate circumstances.
Exactly. And
Therefore,
there are other...
maybe it's a matter of justice to try to level out the playing field a little bit. Maybe I can do with a bit less to lift them up a bit more on the material side.
That takes a good person to do that, Thomas. Not many people have that quality.
Well, this is the point I'm trying to make. Most people don't think systematically about justice.
No, they're too
because
selfish.
they just take what's there, right?
Yeah, it's like, I'll have that. That's for me.
And on the other side, there can be people in hard circumstances just feeling envy and resentment towards the people that live on the good side of the tracks and, have it easy in their eyes. And they think, I'm a human being, you're a human being, right? I love my children, you love your children. Why is it so good for you and so bad for me? And that can just breed resentment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I understand why.
Unless they come to some concept of justice too.
But there's also, you're talking about the obvious differences, but there are also genetic differences. You might have heart disease in the family. You might have cancer.
Yeah.
That doesn't discriminate.
Yeah.
Does not discriminate.
Yeah.
You can be wealthy, you can come from the best family, and you can come down with one of these diseases because you're genetically aligned for it.
Yes. Yeah. Like, let's say you got genes such that all of you are going to drop dead from cancer or heart disease at an early age. Another family doesn't. They got genes
Poorer family may not have that.
Okay, but does one family think, well, that's just the luck of the draw, the roll of the die? You got to live with that. You're responsible for your own medical insurance. We can't give a special allocation, or we're not going to make a contribution towards the fact that your family is prone to disease or extremely vulnerable in this particular area. That's a justice issue.
I think that people should look into that before they have a child with somebody. They should look at their family.
But that is a responsibility that
for deciding to have children.
That lies with the parents, right?
Yeah.
Or the would-be parents. But I'm talking about people who are here, who are already born, who already are given this great gift of existence, because that's what I feel. Life is a gift. Not everybody feels that. Not everybody feels that. I know that there was a child in Syria or somewhere that sued his parents for giving birth to him or her. I don't even, was it a him?
It was a him.
Giving birth to him because he didn't ask to be born.
He had a horrible life.
And he was born into the Syrian civil war, I suppose, and it was a miserable life for him.
Horrible life.
Yeah. Is it fair or just for that boy to try sue his parents?
The whole situation's unfortunate.
Yes, but the philosopher of justice has to decide what's just. Imagine the judge in that case and the lawyers in that case. They do have to decide where justice lies. His lawyers, the boy's lawyers, are going to be saying he has a just claim here that his parents should have exercised more restraint about having children at a time of civil war.
Or put him out for adoption.
And therefore that boy is owed some compensation. Whereas the parents themselves will have their own defence under the law. And one can just imagine what that might be. It could go off in many different directions.
But in this particular case, there was also an area of neglect from the parents too. So it wasn't just the fact that he was born in a war-torn country, that they had no money and whatnot. There was also neglect. So they would have been better off putting the child up for adoption.
Well, I'm not here to judge them, but I'm just saying that how do you adjudicate a case like that? You must be making decisions about what justice is every step of the way. And this transmission as focused on distributive justice, and I hope that I've at least opened the field a bit and stimulated some thought a bit here, because it's a bit obscene, isn't it, when people have Learjets and yachts and McMansions here, there and everywhere, and probably wouldn't even bend down to pick up $100 bill because it's not worth their time and energy. And other people are starving to death and crippled with material insufficiency.
You would be happy with a lot less.
Just a little
their
bit.
Immediate needs.
Yeah, it's just a little bit could make a big difference in their life.
But they can't seem to get it. Yeah.
So these are issues of distributive justice, and I'm just saying, what do you think, you who are hearing this, what do you think the obligation is on those who have towards those who have less? What do you think there's an obligation? These are some of the things that I invite you to consider. And how does that obligation play itself out in the institutional architecture of society and the policies of governments? Thanks for listening.